Well, in the last few days, we are hearing a lot of complaints about not only the shortage of food, but the shortage of teaching materials, teaching and learning materials in our senior high schools. It's become a topical issue now because we've seen that in some places it's left students agitated, parents as well. So really, what is happening? We want to get some answers for you if you're a parent and if you're a student and if you are a headmaster, because the headmasters themselves are asking those same questions. And this is where we can get to interrogate it a bit more and hopefully get you the answers that you seek. And let's get into it. What do we know so far? What has happened so far? We know that the students on Sunday, February 20th, protested the quality of meals offered them by authorities. This is Savelugu Senior High School, by the way, where there have been riots over the quality of the food, particularly milk and fish that they believe that had been served them, which was expired. Now they accuse the school authorities of feeding them with this expired milk and tinned fish, which sparked the riots. And as we know, the MP, the MCE were all at the scene trying to deal with this particular matter. The buffer stock company says they're looking into it because they provide these schools with the food. And if you open it up a bit more, you've had in the last few months, we've had several complaints about the same issue about lack of food to the schools. Over 1,800 students at Damongo SHS, for example, in the Savannah region, expressed worry about the inability of the school to provide them with enough food. Now, barely a day after that, of course, we learned from the buffer stock company that they've now dispatched some food to them in the school to try and deal with the challenge that the students were facing there, right? And then, of course, we've seen in the last few days, NAGRAD hold the press conference, and then to blow this thing up a bit more, because we're beginning to learn from NAGRAD themselves that this goes beyond the food issue, because they talked about learning materials, textbooks, chalks were also in short supply. They complained about generally the learning and teaching materials were also affected in some of the schools. Now, they talk generally about some other concerns they had beyond these supplies, like deletion of teacher salaries and the payroll, delay in the payment of the capitation grant, which in itself, they said was in arrears of more than 2 terms, NAGRAD had alleged there, including also the payment to cover some recurring expenditure. They also say we're in arrears for 2 terms. All of that making it difficult for the schools to run and for teaching as well to go on. And if you're a parent, you may have noticed your ward probably calling you to complain about this. Now, the GES themselves then had to step in with some reactions to some of the concerns that they have raised. According to the GES, chalk, indeed, they admitted, was an issue, but they said that procurement and supplying chalk to schools, and I like this phrase that government officials and civil servants use, it's far advanced. Far advanced is the word, it's a phrase they use. That simply tells you it's not available yet. It's not available yet. And schools have been reopened for some time, and we're having issues of chalk. But they also note that the reason why we're having a shortage of chalk in some parts, because of supply issues. I mean, some places, for example, in regions, they've now dispatched to western, north, eastern regions. In other regions, they seem to have enough. There's so many chalks that they are now beginning to have a glut, and so they are beginning to now redistribute them across the country, right? And so the issue of chalk, which in the past used to be a very contentious matter, is beginning to rear its head again. In the 21st century education, chalk is an issue again that we're talking about. Of course, it raises a whole series of questions. Is it a cash problem? Is it a logistical problem? What really is the challenge that the senior high schools are facing there? And again, they appeal to of course, appeal to the tertiary. We're talking about reaction from the SRCs themselves, that is the students themselves. And rarely do you hear students come together to voice their concerns and frustrations about the problem that we are talking about. But we've seen that in the Ashanti region, right? At the forum, the coalition of the SRCs came together and they appealed to the government for a timely release of food and funds under the free SHS. Because remember that bottom line, the children bear the brunt. And so they're feeling this, and they're asking the government to make sure that this release of food happen timelessly. It must be pointed out What we are talking about isn't the fact that it's happened. It's happened in the past. The headmasters have complained. They were the first to do so, but it hasn't stopped. It is happening again. The SRCs have talked about allowing the PTA some leeway in this, so they can also make some contributions because they used to do so in the past. But I want to also touch on this and show you a graph here that tells a story, right? Because, by the way, the buffer stock company admitted to us yesterday that one of the challenges they had, and they supply the food to the schools, one of the challenges they had was a cash flow problem. They had the cash flow challenge, which government was in arrears to them in terms of paying them what they're due, because they don't have the money. They were unable to pay their suppliers who give them the food for them to hold in buffer, and because of that, they didn't have enough to give to the schools when the schools reopened. It is the reason why we are having the shortage. That's the buffer stock chief executive himself, and that last week Friday they got some checks written for them which cleared in excess of 100 billion cedis, and so it was yesterday that they managed to get some trucks loads of food dispatched to the north. We will get the latest on that, whether the trucks have arrived and whether this is bringing the situation back to normal, but the long-term question needs to be asked. So to the issue about the cash flow, right, that's why we pulled this up for you to consider. This is the free SHS, right? This is the free SHS tracking the budgetary allocation to it. From all indications, we are putting a lot of money still in education at that level, at the free SHS, at the SHS level. Because the government started it off at 1.68 billion, that's a lot of money, right? And you consider that the next year it went even high because there was an explosion in the enrollment numbers. And so 2.43 billion cedis was put into it. But then it dropped again back to 1.97 billion, of course, when COVID began to bite. But if you look at 2022, it's going back up. It's the second highest amount we've dedicated to implementing this policy, right? If you compare to the 2020 figure. So government is still putting a lot of money there, even in the midst of COVID. But then this next slide will show you a different story. We are now measuring, this by the way, is the amount of money that out of the bulk that the Education Ministry is getting, how much of the bulk money goes into free SHS, and that is what you have here. And then how much of the money goes into everything else that Education Ministry is doing. The first thing you observe is that the gap between the other things the ministry is using the money for and free SHS is widening. It's widening. So the Education Ministry or government is definitely giving far more money to other things than to the free SHS. And if you start back from 2019, you begin to see this play out quite obviously. So you have 12.9 billion for other things, out of which 1.6 billion was for free SHS. And then it narrowed, right? So we're giving far more money now in the next year of 2020 to free SHS, and a little bit less than it used to be in 2019 to everything else the Education Ministry is doing. And then the next year, you begin to see the gap widening, which means that more money for every other thing, less money for free SHS. Is that possibly telling us a story as the policy implementation goes on, that the ministry is beginning to carry a bit more load elsewhere other than free SHS, and what is that load? That's something that we need to be looking into. But there are bigger questions about this. And what we do on PM Express is also to talk to the people most affected by this. We're talking to parents. We'll talk also to the students themselves. We'll speak to the government. We'll talk to the buffer stock company. We'll talk to the teachers so we can get to the bottom of this. How do you ensure a consistent supply of these materials to the schools in time before the schools reopen, so the students are not left in the situation where they have to complain or riot, or the concerns that we've seen from the teachers? Stay with me. After the break, we'll get into that. And thank you for staying with us here on PM Express. My guest joining us is Kwesi Kwarteng, spokesperson for the Education Ministry, joins us in the studio. Also joining me is the CEO of the National Food Buffer Stock Company, is Hanan Abdul Wahab, who joins us via Zoom tonight. Also joining me is Raf Sarkodie, is the SRC coordinator for the Ashanti region. So they represent the students, and they held a forum, and we had a lot of the SRC representatives speaking to the issue, asking the government to bring the food to the schools in a more timely fashion. Eva Adomako is a parent of a child in one of the most famous schools in this country, in the central region. And I'm delighted that she joins us right now via phone. Renee Afedo is a teacher. Just to get a sense of what the situation really is in the schools before we bring in the duty bearers with how to get to the bottom of this and resolve it. Let me start with you, Eva. Eva, what's really you have a child in the senior high school in the central region. What has she been telling you about the situation with the food when it's dining time?
Good evening to our viewers and panel members as well. Actually, it's actually not good at all. At all. The children actually go through a whole day, probably just relying on their chobos, provisions, or getting porridge at the dining hall without bread. And from her, what I'm hearing is that they are being fed beans and gari every day. And at times, at a point, getting to a certain extent, they'll ask the other children to go, like the food is not enough for every child. So they should go into their troubles. And they will get out disappointed. This is what is going on in the school.
So this started when? This term?
No, really. Before the previous WASI.
Okay.
Till date, yes.
Okay. And for your child, when have they explained what the school authorities? I mean, as a parent, I'm sure you've made inquiries to the school.
Yes.
I don't know what they've told you.
There's no food.
Okay.
That's what we've been hearing. There's no food.
I mean, when was the last time you visited her?
Actually, the last time I saw her was was it a week ago when they had their speech day? She got an award, so I had to be in the school.
Okay.
Yes. That was the last. In the same situation at the stage, yes.
Okay, you sent some food along?
Yes, I had to. As a parent, and not just my child, what about the less privileged?
Okay.
Do you get it? What about parents who can't really afford, because the troubles have to be stocked at every point in time. And looking at how the situation is not healthy for them. Relying on provisions, confectionaries, is not healthy. They need hot milk to stay healthy and actually concentrate on their books. Just imagine doing calculations with a hungry stomach. How would you even think?
Yeah. I mean, let me hear from, stay with me, Eva. Let me hear from Renee, who is a teacher in a senior high school, a public senior high school. Renee, I mean, your school, I understand, is in the Greater Accra region. Okay, well, she'll join us pretty shortly to get a sense of what the situation is in the school. Eva, stay with me. Let me hear from Raf Sarkodie. There was a forum in the Ashanti region. Raf, thanks for joining us on PM Express.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, I watched that forum of SRCs. What tell us a bit about this forum that you did there?
Well, it was the 25th or the silver anniversary of the Ashanti Regional Students Representative Council. Normally, we have a council of student leaders made up of about 138 schools, senior high schools, technically in Ashanti region. And when we meet like this, on a forum like this, they take advantage to discuss concerns, challenges, and problems that they are encountering, with the hope that stakeholders of education will address them timeously for them. So it was one such occasion that we met, and the regional president, Delancey Amaya of KNUST Senior High School, used the opportunity to drum home some of the challenges that the students are encountering in the various senior high schools in Ashanti region.
Okay, and I heard her talk about, in fact, it was a direct appeal to the government, talking about the challenge with the food supply. It comes late, it's not adequate. What's the nature of the problem from the student's point of view?
Well, so what basically is the real situation here is that the supplies don't get to the schools on time. Schools reopen. Fortunately, when schools reopen, students don't troop in their numbers. So the little that is left, at least the schools are able to manage with the little number. The very moment the population of the school increases with time, then the challenge becomes real. What is happening is that, yes, buffer stock, we will not say that, the schools don't have anything at all, but what is happening is that you may have beans, you may have gari, you may not have flour. So what happens is that you may not be able to get your bread every morning. You may have flour, this one may have flour, this one may have beans and may not have gari. So it's been like the heads may have to, or at times have to collaborate, so that when you have this, then I would have to come to you for it to be able to complement what I have. So yes, the timing in terms of the supply, today as we talk, buffer stock were in some of the institutions to give them their due. And you can imagine that some of the things that the schools received, they had not had them for about all this while that they reopened schools. So if you are ahead and you do not know how to communicate very well to students and make them understand that the menu that is pasted on at the dining hall, we are unable to follow because we do not have this, we do not have that. If you do not have very discerning students, chances are that they would go and misconduct themselves or do anything, thinking that it is a creation of the head not to follow the menu of the school. So our concern basically is that we do not want to see students do anything untoward. We do not want to see any unrest in schools. So we appeal to government that these supplies would get there on time in the right quantity so that the menu that government itself has given to the schools could be followed, so that we do not have any, would have sanity and all that to prevail in the school for sound academic work. And that is the concern of the Ashanti Regional Students Representative Council.
So I get that there's a slightly different picture there in Ashanti region. So like some of the schools don't have food at all. It's just that they have food, but as they say sometimes, it is just, they don't have the variety, I guess is the thing, right? And so they have, some schools have some, other schools don't. And so then if you're not, very creative, you probably will have to serve the students one meal, consistently throughout the week or throughout the day. I guess that's a challenge that you're having there. Okay. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. If I was with me, in your child's school in the central region, I get a sense that in their case, in some cases, the food is not available at all, right? I mean, and they possibly will have to then rely heavily on what they bring if you don't like the only food available in the dining hall.
Like, you don't have an option. It's not about what you don't like.
Okay.
It's not even sufficient for everybody.
Okay.
So then the remaining students have to go back. And also sometimes they can't be eating beans and gari every day.
Okay.
Just imagine, even outdoors, how do you survive on beans and gari every day?
Because apparently that's all the school has now, and so that's all they said. Okay.
At that point in time, yeah.
Okay. We would hear the teacher pretty shortly, but I have with me Kwesi Kwarteng, who speaks for the Education Ministry, but I also have Mr. Hanan, who is the Chief Executive of the Buffer Stock Company. Yesterday, he gave us an update. When we spoke to him, he talked about the cash flow challenges, and the government had now supplied some, if I'm not mistaken, 130 million on Friday. The checks have cleared. So yesterday, the buses, he said, had been dispatched to send some food to some of the schools in need. Mr. Hanan, do you have an update on the supplies that you began to, make yesterday with the trucks that you dispatched from the buffer stock company? Have they all arrived and have they supplied the food in adequate quantities for the schools in need? Kindly unmute for me, Mr. Hannan. Kindly unmute for me. Okay.
Yeah, good evening, Evans.
Fantastic, I can hear you.
Yeah, and to my colleagues who are on this platform to discuss these issues. I've heard from Madam Eva Domaku and then Ralph Sarkodie. It is an unfortunate situation. Your crew were in my office, giving them an update of what we are doing. And like I indicated to them when they were in my office, that we receive some monies from government, which we have paid suppliers for them to, purchase and then move their food items to the designated schools across the country. And as we speak now, most of the schools have started receiving their food items. Flour was a major issue. I'm happy Ralph has brought up the issue of flour. But the update I have on flour is that we have contracted Olam Ghana to supply the first 2 months requirement of the schools across the country, which is ranging between, I think it's 58,080 bags nationwide. That has been paid, and some schools have started receiving, most schools have started receiving their bread flour. And the situation today is not what it is yesterday, because most schools have received various food items. But on the issue of central region, we know we have a general problem of delay in supplies, but there has not been a situation where there is no single food in any school. The fears of heads of the institutions are that once they are about depleting their stocks and there's no sign of food coming in, then they get to worry. Because as soon as the stocks are completely depleted, then they will have no other way of feeding the students. We know food is very important here. And of course, Evans, you agree with me, we are not in normal times. We haven't encountered this situation in the 2017-2018 academic year, 2018-2019 academic year. Most of the food items, Papa Stock is contracted to supply 18 non-perishable food items, and we have categorized them into 3. We have the farm produce, we have the locally processed food, and the imported food items. Ideally, like one of your interviews with the National Child's President, ideally there should be food at least a week before student resumes. And
that brings up the question: why weren't we able to supply before the schools reopen?
You see, like I said, we are not in normal times, and some of the food items we don't have absolute control over them. Like the imported food items, there are disappointment in terms of shipment and arrival, date of arrival, clearing, and distribution. So ideally, like I said, food items should go to school.
But Abdul Wahab, is it the case that the suppliers, because of the times you're in, could not supply, or it is fundamentally a cash problem which led to the problem that we are facing today?
Fundamentally, it's a cash problem. I've indicated, I didn't hide that from you when you came to my office. I've made it clear to you that fundamentally it's an issue of a cash flow a problem, which government has taken steps to address. We have received an amount of 113 million. We have disbursed it to the suppliers, and the Ministry of Food and Agri, I'm sure Kwartin will give you more details as to the plans that we have going forward, so that there's not going to be some of these issues. There have been some projections of how much the ministry will need in terms of funding of free education, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. So all these financial projections have been done and submitted to the Ministry of Finance, because they should also know out of the total budget approved for the free education in a particular academic year, how the first quarter of the program, how much of food is the ministry consuming through buffer stock. So I was just making a point on the central region. Yes, I know there are issues nationwide, not just central region, but as a company responsible for the feeding component of the Free Senior High School, we have actually, received such a complaint that Madam Eva Adomako is, as a parent, that is seeing that students have been fed with rice and beans for a number of periods without any other food. Because as a company too, we have alternatives. What we do is that usually when there are some of these issues of delay in supplies, as a company, we do advance our regional managers some funds immediately so that they can do some local purchases within the locality. Sometimes when the supply is delaying, we go on our way to provide some professional foods, say 5 bags of rice, this number of bags of sugar, just to sustain them before the supplier.
Yeah, I mean, I need to ask this before I hear from Mr. Kwati. So the 130 million you received, and you said, I think the checks cleared mostly on last Friday. Will they be able to cover the entire school term, the semester?
No, not at all. The ministry is making preparation to advance more money, and I had a discussion with the minister yesterday, and the controller is about to release some money to the ministry, so that part of it will come to buffer stock, so we can pay most of our suppliers again, so that they can continue. You see, this issue of indebtedness of buffer stock to the ministry would always be there, because
yeah, I mean, in fact that is one of the questions I'll come to. How do you solve this problem permanently? Because it's true, we've had this complaint before. So I'll come to that shortly. Let me bring in Mr. Kwesi Kwarteng. Mr. Kwarteng, so fundamentally, it's a cash problem. I mean, the ministry is fundamentally responsible for making sure that that cash problem doesn't exist, or it doesn't affect the schools.
Yeah, Evans, obviously, if you look at the way government structure is when it comes to the facilitation of monies to all these agencies or ministries, there are indeed certain lapses and sometimes even genuine challenges. And that's what Mr. Hanan just adduced to. But in this case, if you look at the impact, I do not think it's had that very dire consequence on the provision of the services that buffer stock are supposed to give. But for me, I really want to raise the conversation even beyond what government is doing. I feel that as an institution like buffer stock, if this was a private company, probably by now they would have started conversation about how to bring in other institutions, other financial institutions like banks, to at least give them credit facilities.
Why are you shifting the blame on them?
No,
I mean, given the cash, it's a fundamental education ministry.
I'm not sure it's about shifting blame.
I mean, I'll be glad if you can deal with your responsibility, and then he can address his.
So, Evans, so you make me answer how you see, the point is that I admitted to the challenge, and of course, I mean, issues of cash, you should be speaking to Ministry of Finance. This is about the point that who really has to pay the cash. But what I'm saying is that there could be such delays, there could be such challenges. Those things are inevitable. Even if today, I mean, we probably, Ministry of Finance or the government has every money to be able to facilitate you buffer stock. If you look at the operations of buffer stock, there is no way that they were going to get all their cash within a certain space of time every time, because at the end of the day, claims have to be made every time. And when claims are made, processes, administrative processes. Of course, there are some genuine delays, some too that probably there need to be some improvement on. And so at every point in time when supplies, there will be that gap or there will be that space where there will be a debt. But ultimately, government has to admit that responsibility and deal with that challenge of providing cash to such an institution.
I mean, so you run a ministry, all the schools under you, SHS is your flagship intervention, schools are reopening, food ain't available. That is unacceptable.
For me, I feel that where there is challenge, leadership has to demonstrate leadership by admitting where the challenge is. But where leadership will be unhappy and has to demonstrate its disaffection for conversation about the challenges when it's sensationalized. For instance, let me give you an account. If you listen to Eva's account, of course, I mean, even Hanan himself admits that Central Region, there are challenges. Yeah. But if you listen to Eva's account, on the first premise, he started that since last year, there is no food at all. Then as you probe her further, she admits there is food. But at some point, there is no bread and students repeatedly are served with one meal. So it is not really a problem of shortage. I mean,
there is shortage.
No, that is...
the period is not definitely the word you use, sensationalizing. Mm-hmm. She has a child in the school.
Yes.
And she says that they have told them to rely on the chop box.
Evans.
If there's food, Evans. Why would they be told to rely on chop box?
Evans, I am not here to run away from responsibilities. No, far from that. I would even be glad that you could have asked her which school so that we quickly go in.
We know the school. I mean, we put it on the screen. It was on the screen.
Wesley
Girls.
Okay, very well. I mean, I'm sure the minister by tomorrow will hear it so that quickly. But I'm sure tomorrow, if there is such a challenge, we should be.
I mean, Abdul Hanan, who supplies the food, admits Central Region has a problem.
Yes, but I am just getting to know of this food because I mean,
so you cannot say to the parent that she's being sensational.
No, Evans. The point is that let's look at the account that she gave. The first point was that there was no food at all.
But that's a fundamental truth that there isn't
no food at all.
That they were told, and she backed it with evidence. They were told the child was told that rely on your chop box. That's the only reason why there's no food. That's the only right to be told to rely on the chop box.
Evans, so
me and you went to school, so we know.
Evans, that is the account that I have. You see, there are structures of getting food. And of course, I mean, when there is no food, there are structures of making food requisition. So far as we are concerned, as the ministry is concerned, GS is concerned, I mean, JS is responsible for the pre-tertiary schools. Within that school that you just mentioned, we've not had any official complaint that they lack food. But I'm also not running away from the fact that such comment could be very genuine. But I'm saying that if we want to play the sensational game, at the end of the day, it doesn't solve.
But you can't use that word. She's not being sensational.
No.
I mean, how are you defining sensational?
I only brought in her account. I only brought in her account. At least you asked a question and you painted a picture as though there is a general problem of food shortage.
There is.
No, there is not.
Why is buffer stock? Mm-hmm. Buffer stock says Education Ministry, Finance Ministry failed to give them money. They only got the money on Friday. Mm-hmm. When schools have long been reopened. It was yesterday.
He never said that.
Yeah, say again.
He never said supplies were not being delivered to the school.
No. He just said, I mean, he's there. I mean, I'm not. Yeah. He said yesterday they put food on trucks. And he's hoping that by today, the supplies are reaching schools. That is an admission that there was a problem until the cash came in.
Evans, the point is that, I mean, Hanan is here. You can ask him their operational, models. Almost every time supplies are going on off, because at some point you have to stock and restock. And so if you want to, based on that, to suggest that the fact that there are supplies being delivered, so there is no food. I'm saying that, yes, we admit that there is a challenge. Yeah. We admit that challenge ought to be solved. Of course, Hanan just mentioned that, I mean, there are some areas that ought to be cleared. That indeed ought to be cleared. But the point that I'm saying is that if you want to, based on that, and suggest that there are food shortages in our schools.
There is food
there
shortage.
Is no food shortage.
If there's food shortage,
give me 5 schools. Give me 5 schools where
you just had one. I mean, what? You don't take my word for it.
Are you able to
don't take my word for it. Listen to the buffer stock company.
Okay.
Telling you that they had yesterday to put food on trucks to dispatch them.
Yes. Do you know the reason? Do you know the reason? The reason is
because there isn't food.
No.
Ashanti region. Ashanti region. We just heard from the Ashanti region making the point that they also had issues with adequate supply of variety of foods. So it's a nationwide problem.
That cannot be construed as a shortage. Listen,
what is it?
Listen. You can ask Hanan. For instance, buffer stock is supposed to deliver, let's say, 17 food items. At the end of the day, suppliers are able to deliver, let's say, 16. That cannot be construed as food shortage, even though there is one left that ought to be supplied. Often at times there could be logistical delay, challenges.
But that's not a reality today. The reality today is that there was no cash. So the suppliers were owed and they didn't supply you.
No, that is not the case. That's
what he said.
Hanan said that.
There's a cash flow problem.
Evans.
There's a cash flow problem.
I'm sure, will you allow Hanan?
Yeah, it's there. I mean, so
Hanan said that since
let's hear him.
Since the reopening of the schools, they have been making some deliveries. Of course, not all food items have been delivered to the various schools, but some food items have gone, and then they are also in the process of delivering the rest. He never said that there are no food items in the schools, and what he said wasn't that because.
Don't worry. Let's hear Hanan himself. But I'll come to you really mainly about the solution to this, right? I mean, because the education ministry is ultimately responsible for that. Hanan.
Evans.
Yes.
You have decided to become my spokesperson, and distorting my presentation, if I may put it that way.
Which part of it distorts your presentation?
You know, when I said that, yes, there are some challenges regarding food supplies, I made it very clear that sometimes it is not even about the number of food items, it's the quantities. I made mention of headmasters having the fear of having total depletion of their stock. So they are calling for their total stock for the semester. So bulk of the food items actually started moving yesterday when I made it clear to you that suppliers have received their checks. But then there have been supplies ongoing, but they are not as fast as we expected.
Yeah, so what is that? I mean, that is shortage. You don't have enough to supply, excuse me, you don't have enough to supply all that the schools need. And we've had, yes.
If I supply total quantity of food required for Achimota Senior High School, they are not going to consume it within a day. It is for them to consume it for the semester. And in fact, even for the semester, headmasters are supposed to put in request of the quantity because of what? Storage constraint. Recently, we have sent a total rice requirement to St. John's in the Greater Accra region. They have rejected part of the stock because of lack of space. So we have to move the food to another school. So in our license to the suppliers and to the headmasters, copy to the headmasters, it's clearly stated that headmasters are supposed to make requests. We have also seen a situation where suppliers will carry food to the schools and the headmasters will turn them away.
Yeah, but let's talk about the headmasters. Let's talk about the since you brought it up. It is, in fact, this matter was first raised by CHAS, and their complaint was that government, buffer stock, why did you have to wait for the schools to reopen and allow them to be in a situation where they're now struggling to adequately feed the students before attempting to supply?
But we have answered that. I've even given you antecedent experience stating that we have never found ourselves in this situation. But then, with the kind of situation we find ourselves, it is because of how much we owe our suppliers.
Yeah, but that's
and our suppliers are very, sensitive, and they have feelings for this.
But that's exactly what I was telling Kwesi, that you said your suppliers were owed, and that is why you were not able to supply the food at the beginning of the term.
That didn't prevent them from going ahead to supply, but not at the rate expected. It didn't prevent them from supplying, but not at the rate expected.
So what you're saying is
bulk of the food items started moving yesterday, and most of the schools, you can confirm, most of the
Yeah,
schools
but
started
how?
receiving.
So most of the food items started moving yesterday. How long have schools? How long has it been? How long has it been since schools reopened?
And I'm saying that ever since school reopened, there have not been situations where dining halls have been shut down.
But you've just said, I mean, and the reason why, see, the reason why we spoke to parents, the students, is to get an appreciation of the situation in the schools. You just said the parent in the central region, you said the central region has an issue. Tell us that the child was told that, just a second, the child was told, the child was told that there isn't food, rely on your chop box, right? Rely on your chop box. I mean, stay with me, in fact, stay with me. Let's drill down a bit more. Let's get to the schools. Let me speak to a teacher who is joining us right now. Hello, Renee. Hello, Renee.
Hello, Ivan.
Renee, nice to have you join us. Your school is in Greater Accra. I mean,
yes.
Greater Accra, should I assume that you don't have any issue with food?
It isn't that we don't have an issue, but ours have been managed.
Okay.
In that the menu for the school, because, for example, there's shortage of flour. So breakfast that we take in anything flour like bread or donut has been changed for the students. So they take more of the maize products or rice products, like ekwebeni or rice porridge. That's a bit heavy for them in the morning. And then also, they've been told that there's a problem. Management did decide that both the student leaders and the management meet, and then the information is sent to the students. So they are aware that there's a shortage, but it is being managed for them.
Okay, so this is shortage of flour.
Yes, in my school.
So that's the only one you have shortage of flour.
For now, that's what I know.
Okay. Okay, so that's, I think, Hanan, fair to say you raised that earlier, that flour has been an issue.
And then, Evans,
yes.
If I may come in on flour.
Yes.
The truck driver personally called me the day before yesterday, asking where he should deliver flour for Greater Accra.
Okay.
Then I called the management of Olam and said, no, we have given you the list of the schools. So after the day yesterday, or the day before yesterday, they have started distributing flour in the Greater Accra region. So I'm sure, I don't know of her school, but I'm sure at the end of the day, by close of day tomorrow, they should be able to cover
they'll have
Greater
a flour.
Accra school, because Greater Accra has a list, boarding schools that Buffer Stock is handling.
Okay.
But you see, let's go back to Central Region. You see, we have to be very frank and then be very sincere, because there are thousands of parents watching us and listening to what we are discussing this evening.
Yes.
We, Buffer Stock, haven't received such complaint from Wesley Girls that they don't have any food to feed the students, to the extent of even sending some of them away to go and rely on their chop box. No. Like I said, sometimes when it becomes critical, headmasters, the schools themselves, we send them money. Because usually, sometimes most of the food items, especially the imported food items, are being loaded from Greater Accra region. So imagine a truck leaving Greater Accra to Northeast, Upper East region, and Upper West region. Anything can happen along the way. Breakdown of vehicle and other, unforeseen situation. So in that case, when we ascertain where the truck is, we can estimate the number of bags of food the schools in that area may require. And sometimes the supplier even goes ahead to even, finance them before he gets there with the food. So I disagree totally, because I think it should, if that is the case, and I'm sure the Minister for Education is watching this program.
No, his right hand man. His right hand man is here, so he's going to pass on the message.
I mean, actually launch an investigation.
You should. I mean, you definitely should. Yes. I mean, you said earlier though, Hanan, that the central region generally you had an issue.
No, I said generally nationwide.
No, but you after Eva spoke, you isolated central region and you said yes, you had an issue there.
The issue in Central Region is not different from the issue in Upper East Region or Upper West Region.
Well, I'm just telling you what you told us. When you finished talking, you said yes, Central Region, you had an issue.
I brought in Central Region because you brought it as a parent.
Exactly.
From Central Region.
And I'm just telling you that you said that. I mean, so that.
Exactly. It has become a subject of discussion because she is there having her word in one of the schools in Central Region.
Yeah.
So but the situation in Central Region is not different from the rest of the region.
Good. So I think that establishes the basic point that there's definitely a problem that needs to be dealt with. I mean, and that was the point I was making earlier to Mr. Kwating, and I want to counter that.
I also want to make it clear, Evans. You see, sometimes when we say shortage is the thing is not there.
Yeah, but the thing. Sorry, I don't think we should get. I don't think we should get involved. I really don't like semantics. If you say there's cash flow, you haven't paid your suppliers, and so they haven't provided the food. It's not there until you provide them with the money. They didn't supply you, so we shouldn't get into semantics.
So what are they eating?
No,
but you see. So you're saying.
Over 1.26 billion.
Let's go there.
Over 1.26 million.
So you're saying to parents.
Yes, 1.26.
You're saying to parents. And the students who have just told you on the show that in some cases they're having to eat beans throughout the day. They're having to eat cocoa without.
Have you verified? Have you verified?
We have, but I will not do a show.
You just had. Excuse me. You just said you verified.
You've just heard a parent. You've heard the teacher. You've heard the SRC's reps in Ashanti Region, and you've heard that all verified, saying to you, including Hanan himself admitting that they have to send supply yesterday. You're saying that because they can eat one meal throughout the day and throughout the week, they have food, it's okay. That's what you're saying to parents?
Stop this.
No, but you're saying that, so why are they eating? That's the question you asked me.
Evans.
I'm asking that question on behalf of the parents.
Evans, I don't think this helps. This only gives...
No, it's fundamental.
Evans, hold on.
You see, but the comment you made about that they have food, I'm putting a question to you. You're saying it's okay.
Can I? You see,
you're saying the situation is okay.
Evans, these things doesn't help. It only increases viewership. At the end of the day, it doesn't solve the problem. That's
why I came to. I said, let's go to the solution. But you passed the comment.
No.
I think you're being unfair to the parents. That they have an issue. They're telling they have an issue. And you say, but they have food. They are eating. So there's no issue.
I feel that we are not discussing these issues in isolation. And context is also very important. Whatever a supposed parent might have called in, she
didn't call in. We called.
You called. Whatever interview that you might have had with a supposed parent or a teacher or whatever. I think it's only fair that you also have to balance it and juxtapose with what the buffer stock gentleman just
and what you've also said.
And what I am also saying that, so far as we are concerned, we do not have any official complaint of food shortage. You see, the whole point is about the picture that you want us to admit and push through our throat that there's a food shortage. I admit that there is a challenge, as Hanan rightly said. But that challenge does not necessarily mean that there's a shortage. He said, for instance, you have about, let's say, food items, about 18 of them, about 17 has been supplied. Again, there is also that bit that you are expected to provide, let's say, this quantity of food. That is supposed to take the students throughout the entire semester. But within the space of time, presently, probably you may be having food quantity that could take them for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. That cannot be considered.
Let's deal with that. I came to you. I don't want to be drawn into semantics. I think it's very clear what the problem is. Let's deal with the solutions going forward. And I made the point earlier that this is not the first time a complaint like this has happened with the food issue, right? What from the ministry's point of view? I think for me, what I've heard is that the paying supplies on time is one of the issues.
Yes.
Distributing it, what you have,
yes,
equally, so there's even distribution across it is another issue. I mean, what is a permanent solution to this? Because SHS, of course, we know had led to more people in the classrooms, etc. And from what I understand from the teachers, the rest of the, freshers are going to come in when? Later?
I think 4th April, okay. 4th.
And Nagraf was telling us a couple of days back that their fear is that if you don't supply all the adequate food, when the number increases, it may. So what are the solutions that you are considering?
We understand the concerns of parents, we understand the concerns of teachers. We also believe that, at least as duty bearers, it is our responsibility not to sensationalize the issues and put the issues in the proper context. And then when schools are supplied, at least it should be made to all Ghanaians that at least there are foods. When there are no foods, we have to make admission and provide such.
Forgive me, we have to quickly fix the microphone. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, I'll hear Kwesi Kwarteng's contribution intervention on the solution to this challenge. I'll hear the buffer stock company as well. And I'm sure you hear the students themselves also proposing their own solutions to the issue. We'll hear all that when we return. Stay with me. So thanks for staying with me. I mean, as you can see, this is a very one of those topics when it has to do children and parents. It's definitely one that gets to people's key fundamental issues. I want to get straight to the issue about solutions, right? Mr. Kwarteng was dealing with that for me before the break. Mr. Kwarteng, so I was talking about solutions going forward, anticipating that the first years also come in.
Yeah,
later.
I mean, just concluding on the solutions, like I said, that we are leaders, we take responsibility for everything that happens in the schools. Of course, buffer stock, being an agency of the ministry, is responsible for facilitating food to the schools. So far as the ministry is concerned, we do not have such records. And then that is why we did not want to make an admission of that. But of course, it also doesn't mean that those concerns that has been raised will not be tackled. For instance, when you rightly mentioned the Wesley Girls Schools, I mean, we'll find out and quickly if there is such a situation, we'll provide intervention. But I'm very surprised if such a situation existed. I mean, the leadership of the school had not made us to know. But ultimately, I mean, Hanan raised a very fundamental issues on cash and cash issues, and that's why I made it rightly clear that if this was a private institution, probably they should be finding alternative approaches. Because, I mean, buffer stock is more or less like a multi-million dollar company if it was belonging to a private entity. And I am aware that the Minister for Education, Dr. Osei, currently has been also having conversations about an alternative source of funding for the buffer stock as an institution, so that as and when government money comes in, whether it delays or it comes in within that,
they can do it themselves as they wait for government to
to at least how do you call it, augment their efforts. So that conversation is also going on. But let me assure parents that wherever there is challenge, if we get to know the name of the school quickly, we'll move in. But I also don't want parents to at least be afraid or be so much worried that there are no foods in the schools. We have about over 1.26 million, about 722 schools. And are we very sure that out of these 722 schools, there is that dire situation as how it's been painted to look? Who will have our case? I mean, this whole country would have broken down. So yes, I mean, these things, it keeps coming, these challenges, we hear about them. But that's why.
So the solution lies in empowering the buffer stock companies so that they can also raise their own funds whilst they wait for government. So constantly there's
the solution with regards to the delays of payment.
Yeah, to the suppliers.
Yes. But largely, it really has not really affected that much. That one, I want to put it in that proper context.
Well, that's Mr. Kwarteng. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Hanan. Thank you, Eva, the parent, the teacher, Renee, and obviously the student reps from the Ashanti region who spoke to us tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening.